Hello YouTube, this is Historical Gun Weeb. The name will be subject to change in the future. This is just what was free. Videos about Smith & Wesson, as you can tell by the title. There's motives for this video. When I was into guns, including my first Smith & Wesson gun, I knew nothing about their anti-gun pass, nothing about the internal locks that the community calls Hillary holes on their revolvers. Many older guys mention their anti-gun deal, but they don't mention specifics on the deal. There's current critiques that are very valid with Smith & Wesson, like the quality control on revolvers, the number of revolvers sold with internal locks that don't have non-lock options, lack of higher-end semi-auto options. If you want to get technical, Smith & Wesson does host the NSSF talking points on their website for the Fix NICS Act, the act that gave $400 billion in funding it to get more records for the NICS system, track bump stocks used in crimes, etc. Main critique pro-gun side has with it is that there was nothing on the pro-gun side. It was just stuff that would make the anti-gunners happy with expansion on the NICS system, with data they're able to get. Nothing on the pro-gun side, not the topic of this video. But my goal is essentially to provide a background on the topic. And if you're a visual listener, I apologize. You're going to have me repeat some stuff you see on the slideshow to try to make it friendly to audio listeners. If you're an audio listener, you might miss a couple tiny things on the slide, but overall 90% should still be able to get the gist of the video without seeing it if you just want to have it run in the background as you drive to work. Why trust me? Primary reason, I show the links on my sources. I have a crap load of sources. I did too much research, which I'm going to admit, it wasn't a lot, but I did spend a couple days looking all this crap up. Think I have roughly 15-20 links, read the entire agreement, yada yada, and on the slides you're gonna see that. And let me know what people think. If they like me having the links, if they don't like me having it. It would be easier if I didn't show my sources, but I'm a new person. Why are you gonna trust my word? So I'm providing the sources for stuff that you can look into. I might have missed some stuff, I'll be honest. I also have condensed this video. This is probably my third or fourth time recording it because I'm trying to shorten it as short as possible while still getting the goal of the video of the background information and some of the nerdy details, because I like some of the nerdy details. So, why did Smith & Wesson take the deal? Before we get into that, it annoys me. They always love to mention, we actually provided child safety locks before it was required, which, yeah, but they did it as a part of an agreement with Bill Clinton in 1997, along with Glock, Beretta, Taurus, H&R, H&K, Mossberg & Sons, SIG Arms. And this was an agreement with ASSC, a gun manufacturer group, kind of like the NRA for gun manufacturers. ASSC is no longer around, and SSF is the main one that's currently around, and they will be mentioned. But essentially, they agreed to provide child safety locks with new guns before it was federally required later. And it is federally required later. And I guess before we go much further, keep in mind, this was during the assault weapons ban. If there was a golden age of gun control in America, it was the 90s. They had assault weapons banned. They had imports banned. They had most of the stuff anti-gunners wanted at this time. And keep in mind, Smith & Wesson was owned by the British at this time. Most significantly, they had a lot of lawsuits. The source here mentions 15 lawsuits against Smith & Wesson for gun violence. Another source, I believe, mentions 32 lawsuits, but they were worried about bankruptcy. Their CEO thought it was a good idea. Spoiler alert, he's not a gun guy. He pretended to be a gun guy in 2000, but he's not a gun guy. And that's probably also why some of the terms of the agreement don't make sense, even if you haven't worked at a gun store. If you just know how some of this stuff works, you'll see a lot of flaws in the agreement. So these are the facts that the Clinton administration mentions in the link below. And it's going to be 2 slides of this. For visual listeners, I apologize. You're going to listen to me repeat some points. External locks, like child locks, were required for pistols within 60 days. Smith & Wesson was already doing this. Internal locks were required in 2 years. Those are the ugly locks on the revolvers specifically. Smart gun technology has to be funded with 2% of their annual revenue. New Smith & Wesson guns won't be able to accept pre-ban magazines, so they can't use 3rd gen 5906 mags in the M&P pistols. They had to make new ones if this agreement was followed. Keep that in mind. Spoiler alert, they backed out of it, but they can't design new guns that can take pre-ban mags. Firearms tested by ATF. Semi-auto pistols have a loaded chamber indicator, essentially something to show you when you're looking at the gun that you can know it's loaded or not loaded. Ballistic testing, new models were provided to ATF/FBI for ballistic testing that they would put in a database. There was smart gun stuff that they wanted to that we're not going to get into that much. Continued terms, they won't sell to dealers who they think have a lot of guns show up in crimes. Subjective. Authorized dealers will not sell guns unless every seller at the gun show conducts background checks. This means if Joe Blow wants to sell Grandpappy's shotgun or Grandpappy's 1911 or just their old hunting rifle, unless they can conduct background checks, they can't do it. In practice, I'm sure they'd be okay if they just had a dealer doing background checks, probably hustling everyone for $60 for background checks to be done. I'm sure that'd satisfy it. But if you get technical, it actually might not. Essentially, if you're a Smith & Wesson affiliated dealer or distributor, you can't be selling assault weapons or quote-unquote large capacity mags. So you want to sell a mini 14, 20, 30 rounder mag, you can't do that. As a dealer, if you sell new Smith & Wessons, you want to sell old Colt Sporter 1 from 1968, nope, you can't. It's an assault weapon. So it kind of screws with the used market too. Essentially, background check has to be passed to sell a firearm. Doesn't sound like a big deal, but if you're in a state that the concealed carry license satisfies the next check, that means you have to wait around for it. There's some other stuff here. If you're an audio listener, I'm skipping a couple of them. Sorry. There's other details mentioned that were not mentioned by Clinton. 10-pound trigger pulls suck. That was what they wanted the trigger pull resistance to be. In theory, they couldn't have any barrels below 3 inches, but they still made Model 60s in the year 2000, so I'm not sure. I think all their guns met the accuracy standards that had to be met to sell like a 2.5 inch barrel and all that stuff, but there's a whole bunch of stuff in other terms. They had to have a proof cartridge for each pistol. They wanted to do that, I think, for the smart gun stuff they didn't get into, but you had a proof cartridge with new pistols. They did do this for a while, even though they pulled out of the deal. The FFL liability insurance was $1 million for damages, injuries, or death. There's vague details, like ammo has to be stored separately from firearms for Smith & Wesson dealers. Does that mean a different room or what? Some of the stuff was pretty vague. Some of it was really strict. People under 18 have to be accompanied by a parent if they're in a part of the store that sells firearms or ammo. This could be satisfied with a sign. Annual training for employees to help them know how to prevent straw purchases. There's a lot of other stuff. Buyers have to show they could safely handle, store firearms. This could be done with hunter safety, NRA basic pistol certification. They had some other stuff they were talking about, but the other thing was you can show it to the dealer that you know how to do it. Like the dealer could do their own little test, it sounds like. I think California does something like that. Don't quote me. There's a whole lot of more stuff I can go into for the sake of time, even though I have a bunch written down here. Display cases must be closed except when a single firearm is being shown. Place like Sportsman's Warehouse or Bass Pro, this could be very annoying. Do they mean just one display case or all of them? And this also means you can't have comparisons. If you want to compare a snub-nose Smith & Wesson to a compact third-gen Smith & Wesson and compare the sizes, you can't just have both out at once by this definition. This would be incredibly annoying for big and small shops. I could go more into it, but for the sake of time, I'm skipping stuff, including stuff I was thinking about talking about. Lots of immediate effects. Glock originally was going to join the agreement, but they thought the agreement was unreasonable when they heard the terms and backed out. Smith & Wesson was dropped by one of their largest distributors. Gun owners boycotted them. I would say it was probably thanks to the NRA and GOA, and NSSF made it clear they were unhappy with them and didn't think other manufacturers would budge. And NSSF is a gun manufacturer, like a gun manufacturer rights group, essentially, kind of like NRA for gun makers. The Clinton White House did try the carrot. They did try to persuade a bunch of police departments to buy guns just from makers that joined the agreement. This is the Washington Post article that talked about that. Smith & Wesson had to lay off over 100 workers. In 2001, the new owner met with the NRA to end the backlash. We'll get into the CEO in another slide, but short version, he wasn't a gun guy, and that's probably why the term sucked, and that's also why he didn't mind making the deal. Company got sold for $15 million. It was originally purchased for $112.5 million. There's a lot of effects. I also think some of the laws that are examined were passed because the gun manufacturers were worried about getting sued into oblivion. One of the links mentioned compares it to what the Clinton administration did with the tobacco industry to try to get them to start doing self-censorship in certain things. Essentially, lots of immediate effects, as you can see. Bill Clinton did say, quote, "But I think the American people will have such an overwhelmingly positive response to what they have done that I hope other manufacturers would follow suit," unquote. This was obviously not what happened. Everyone was pissed about this. And this was kind of during what I'm going to call the golden age of gun control in the 90s. You got most of what you wanted if you were an anti-gunner. Quote-unquote assault weapons are banned, so no scary flash hiders or 15 round mags or any of this stuff. But, this also is a sign people were starting to not like it as much, though I also think it's because of the NRA boycott that they didn't like it. On to the with and without locks. The area circled on the top one, no lock. Bottom has a lock. The lock, it's that little annoying little hole. Sometimes it engages on its own. Apparently, I haven't had it happen. I only own one model with the lock because I think the locks are ugly. But onto the CEO. The CEO was not a gun guy. He did claim in 2022 criminals and mentally unwell shouldn't have guns. He didn't specify what he means by that, because that's already been a theme, I believe, since Gun Control Act of 1968. It's been prohibited. He doesn't specify if he meant universal background check or what. He kind of, to me, seems like one of those fake gun guys, like he pretended to be in 2000. He maybe has a couple guns, but he doesn't know much about them. He did not regret the deal with Clinton. He believed it was the right thing to do and all this stuff. If you're not a gun person watching this, it might not make sense, but as a gun person, the deal sucked if you were wanting to buy Smith & Wessons. You'd have to buy from only someone selling new stuff. You couldn't find someone selling an old cool pre-ban you might like, or Browning high power. Guy couldn't sell old Browning high powers because of the mags. So it hurt everyone who likes guns deeply, at least. There are certain laws that were passed because of this. The Terror Amendment, might be saying it wrong, don't really care. ATF can't give firearms trace data to anyone outside law enforcement. It was done to protect gun manufacturers from lawsuits like Smith & Wesson dealt with. The 2005 PLCAA gave gun manufacturers who were following federal law immunity from most lawsuits. If they were following federal law, they were gonna be protected for the most part. This also required pistols to be sold with external locks because they added another bill onto it. And the bill did mention armor-piercing ammo, but it still refers to armor-piercing handgun ammo, and obviously, just like everything else, exempts law enforcement / military because they're better than you. There's a lot of effects on Smith & Wesson today, not directly from the deal. Some are, some aren't. They sold AR platforms pretty quick after the assault weapons ban expired, so that showed they were kind of abandoning their old side. As I believe I mentioned earlier, they did get new ownership pretty quick and shit-canned the old CEO the same year. In 2000, they had new leadership in 2001, so under this new leadership, they were more pro-gun. They, for some reason, kept internal locks on most of their revolvers, though the last couple of years they started backing off on it. Like 5 of the models that have no locks were done in this year, like the 2 Lipsy edition guns and the model 1036 and one of the others, I think, didn't have locks freshly this year, but they also had proof cartridges for a while. I know in 2019 when I bought a new Smith & Wesson pistol that was a police contract overrun, I had one. I had a proof cartridge, but I think it's because it was a contract overrun, because it sounds like it was done by then. I didn't find anything specifically on when they stopped, but some of the stuff on the deal they did clearly do. but they backed out of the really bad stuff because the Bush administration wasn't enforcing it. They're harassed today a little bit by New Jersey and Congress via subpoenas in 2022 for Congress. New Jersey, not sure the year off the top of my head. One of the links has it if you care. They have ties to the NRA. I don't see ties to GOA, FPC, etc., but they have ties to the NRA and NSSF. The move to Tennessee was a response to proposed laws in Massachusetts, not for individuals, but I believe it was a law for gun manufacturers that they were going to try to make it so they couldn't sell ARs or something. Don't know all the details on that one, to be honest, because that was when I stopped doing as much research. Only 8 models of Smith & Wesson revolvers have no internal locks out of those advertised on the website. If you include the 2 Lipsy editions, it's 10, I believe. There could be others, I'm not sure. They donated $500,000 to the NSSF Gun Vote campaign to encourage voters to vote for people who will defend your gun rights. The NSSF, though, they're a gun manufacturers group. Though they are very pro-gun, they are at the end of the day looking out for manufacturers. That's why they supported the Fix NICS Act since 2013, I believe. I might not have the source for that one, but the NRA Dana Loesch, I know she posted a Twitter post about it before. I don't have that link, and I think she talked about how it was a win-win. So even though I don't know if the NRA directly supported it, the NSSF definitely did. Their gun rights manufacturer group, they're looking out for the manufacturers, so they're still going to do stuff like that because the gun manufacturers like to say, hey, see, we want to fix the background check system. We're kind of semi-cool, y'all. Don't get mad at us. That's probably why they're doing it. You're not going to find big-time gun manufacturers saying they want guns sold out of plastic bags from dealers with no background check or anything. You're not going to find mainstream manufacturers supporting that. Though they will be pro-gun in terms of anti-assault weapons ban, mag ban and stuff. Probably against universal background checks and some of this other stuff to not catch heat, but a lot of people learned their lesson. Once in a while, if a manufacturer didn't learn the lesson, but in general, they're quiet about supporting gun control openly in that regard, though gun background checks are a different story. Some of the technical stuff, like gun safety, different story, but my analysis essentially is the pro-gun side pushes this as NRA boycott / consumer boycott. Anti-gun side says it's gun manufacturers and the NRA boycott more than the civilian boycott. I actually agree with the anti-gun interpretation. I think if the NRA wasn't pushing it, GOA, NSSF, I think that helped more than the civilian boycott because the terms of the deal sucked if you wanted to be an affiliated dealer or distributor. That is a pain in the ass and it wasn't worth it. Like the $1 million in liability insurance for each injury, death, etc. That's not going to be worth it for a small-time dealer with 2 employees, also having to do annual training, and you can't buy and sell old pre-ban guns. It doesn't make sense, even though it's the assault weapon ban era, it doesn't make sense for them to do that. And Smith & Wesson has ties with the NRA now. They sell ARs to civilians. They have the M&P pistols. I own half a dozen Smith & Wessons personally. Like I said, this is more for historical knowledge. I don't agree with every single thing this gun company, the NSSF, etc. does, but, obviously I still buy some of their guns. But, they stopped most of the stuff that was a result of the deal. And this is the last little bit I'm going to focus on the additional details. This is more the technical details, if I'm being honest. The company made trigger locks only who purchased them. They purchased Smith & Wesson for $15 million and agreed to liability for Smith & Wesson lawsuits at the time. The article mentioned 32 cities and governments, counties, etc., suing them. One 2003 article states they tried to regain their reputation in May of 2001, 2 weeks after the sale of Smith & Wesson to Safety Hammer. They went to the NRA convention announcing Americans own Smith & Wesson again and to try to get the NRA on their side. I didn't find any old articles of the NRA boycotting Smith & Wesson like all the news articles say. It's likely they removed it when Smith & Wesson tried to make the NRA happy in 2001. I assume they had a website back then. I could be wrong, though. Pretty sure they would have. In 2000, multiple sources reported NRA pressure of a boycott. I have no reason to doubt that. I'm just being blunt with everyone. And here are some of the sources. I used a lot of sources, as you can see. I wanted to try to provide them so people can make their own opinion. Lots of sources, as you can tell. If people want, I'll put it in comments or descriptions or something. But essentially, this is the end of the video. If you think I've earned your subscription, please subscribe, comment, let me know what you think I got right, what you think I got wrong, anything you think I can do to improve these videos. I do plan on doing more presentations like this, assuming people like them at least, but I do plan on doing other type of gun-related content, maybe some history-type content too, but primarily gun stuff and gun history stuff. If you think there's anything that should be added, mention it in the comments. I'll pin comments that I think are significant. If someone points out something that completely went over my head or I skipped due to time. Anyways, thank you very much for watching my video or listening to it if you are an audio listener. Again, I hope to have earned your subscription. Tell me if you like this type of content. Thank you very much. Hope you all have a good day.